Welcome to the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF podcast, the show that unites leading voices in philanthropy, finance, and nonprofit strategy to help donors, their advisors, and the charities they support thrive. Your host today is Ted Hart, one of the foremost nonprofit thought leaders and the author of the DAF Revolution, making a difference in our modern world. Each episode features top experts sharing insider tips and real-world strategies in a lively conversational style, whether you're seasoned in the sector or just starting out. Ted lectures around the world, and now he's here for you. Here's Ted Hart.
Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF. I'm your host, Ted Hart, and today I have the privilege to welcome a true leader in the field of charitable giving and donor psychology, Dr. Russell James. Dr. James is a professor of charitable financial planning at Texas Tech University and one of the most respected voices in the fundraising profession. He's conducted groundbreaking research on donor behavior, major gifts plan giving, and the psychology of generosity using tools ranging from echometrics to functional MRI brain scans. His insights have been cited in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal, CNN, the Chronicle of Philanthropy, and many others. Most importantly, Dr. James is here with us today. Welcome here to the podcast.
Well, thanks for having me, Ted. I'm glad to be here.
Let's jump right in. You brought a unique scientific approach to understanding charitable giving. And on this podcast, we like to provide practical information donors, advisors, and nonprofits can use. One of the most fascinating ideas you've written about is subjective similarity, the idea that people give more generously when they see themselves reflected in the cause or the community that they're supporting. Could you help walk us through why this is so powerful?
Yeah, so this is the idea. You might think of it as establishing a social norm. In other words, the goal is to get the donor to think that people like me make gifts like this, whether that gift be a gift of assets or a gift in a will or a gift to a donor-advised fund. So the critical part of that, we see this in experimental research, just demonstrated in a number of ways, is it's not just that people make gifts like this, but people like me make gifts like this. And that key concept that it is others who are like me in some personally meaningful way, and we each get to define what characteristics are relevant for others who are like us, that becomes more influential. That's what tends to motivate people's giving. We like to oftentimes to give in groups. We like to give in a socially appropriate way. We like to give in a way that reflects our in-group behavior and matches what the expectations are and what others who are like us also do. So those are all related to that concept.
Dr. James, how would a nonprofit put that into practice? What would that look like?
Yeah, so let's look at some really practical examples. One of the most powerful approaches that we see in fundraising, and that's whether it be current gifts, major gifts, gifts and wills, is the idea of sharing donor stories. Now, what we found in experimental results is that to the extent that those donor stories are more similar to the person that you are talking to or communicating with, they're going to be more influential. So let's take a practical example. We tested a variety of messages regarding a plan giving instrument called a charitable gift annuity. We first compared either saying what you could do with this plan giving instrument or what Sarah had done with this plan giving instrument. Well, it turned out it was more effective to talk about what Sarah had done. And then later, we showed people a picture of Sarah. And believe it or not, our results got worse when we showed them a picture. So we thought, well, what's going on here? What's wrong with the pictures? So we decided to test a bunch more Sarahs of a variety of different age ranges. And what we found was that in each case, the best performing Sarah was the one that most closely matched the age of the person answering the question. And in fact, if we showed them an image of Sarah that was age mismatched, well, it was better to just use text alone or show some other photo, but not a photo of the donor. Now, here's the interesting part. This result was not just about age matching, but rather it was statistically explained completely by a person's answer to one question. How much do you identify with Sarah? From she is a lot like me to she is not at all like me. So it wasn't about age, it was about how much is this person like me. Now, that's how we might do it in broader advertising. But let's say you and I are having a communication, and I want to share a story about another donor who is in your situation and how they perhaps used a planned giving instrument, donor advised fund, whatever the case might be. Well, if I know something about their situation and your situation, I might say, Ted, your situation reminds me of another donor I was working with. You both care about many of the same causes. And what he did was okay, so notice what I'm doing there. I'm beginning my donor story by establishing that similarity. I'm not just telling a story, I'm telling a story of someone who is like you. And if I can't think of any way that this donor is like you, I'm just going to say, well, you remind me of another donor, and this is what that donor had done. But we see this in experimental results. In fact, there was one really cool experiment that was done with folks calling in to make a pledge in this case, it was National Public Radio. People were told, we just had a donor who made a gift, and his gift was of such and such amount, which is the amount was above the average gift size. Now, it turned out that they randomly varied whether the example was of a gift that he made or a gift that she made. That example was more influential and it led to higher gifts if that example gender matched the person who was calling. Why? Well, because it's an example of someone who is more similar to me. So we see this in lots of different experimental results, but that's the basic idea and how we might use it in a phone call, in an advertisement, in a one-on-one conversation.
Well, you and I recently had the opportunity to sit down and have a really in-depth conversation. And you've been so kind to offer an endorsement to my new book, The DAF Revolution, Making a Difference in Our Modern World. You wrote, the DAF Revolution offers a clear and engaging look at the growing role of donor-advised funds in modern philanthropy. It's a valuable resource for anyone interested in understanding how DAFs work and why they matter in today's giving landscape. I want to thank you for that. You're talking about storytelling, and in the DAF Revolution, you shared insights from your terrific book, The Storytelling Fundraiser. You make a point that breaking apart the giving process into multiple steps, the initial DAF contribution, fund management, and eventual grant making, can enhance donors' experience of their generosity. Can you help us understand, just as you did with the examples you just provided, the importance of the multi-step process for donors?
Absolutely. And one of the things to keep in mind before we break this apart is something really simple, but something that's sometimes missed by fundraisers. And that is this simple concept that the more enjoyable the giving process is, the more donors are going to give. I know sometimes there can be this conflict. You think you're fighting with donors and we want to, no. It's about establishing, developing the most enjoyable giving process because people are going to do more of it. Now, one of absolutely the most enjoyable ways to give is to use an instrument like a donor advised fund. Well, why is that? Well, the idea is that you are now breaking the giving process into multiple steps. And by breaking it into multiple steps, you are increasing the enjoyment of the experience while reducing the cost of each step. Let me explain what I mean. So in the first step, I send some assets into my donor advised fund. Now notice that's not as painful as, say, writing a check or worse yet, taking cash out of my pocket and handing it to a charitable organization. Why is that less painful? Well, because I still kind of control the assets, right? I can invest them. I can say they're going to go here and here. And so I've really just changed the labeling on my asset, at least from a mental perspective, not getting into the sort of legal niceties of it. So it is still an asset that is under my control. So it's not quite as painful. But yet I am being philanthropic. In fact, I get a charitable deduction for doing that. Now, along the way, what am I going to do? Well, I'm probably going to invest that for a bit of time during that interim. And what happens? Well, every time I look at that account, I'm reminded of my philanthropy. I am philanthropic. These are my philanthropic investments. I'm being a good person. And so I get reminded of that on a regular basis. And perhaps those investments grow in the meantime, and I feel even more impactful and charitable. And then at the end, I get to transfer that money from a donor advised fund to a charity to make an impact. Now, notice something about that third step. It's not as painful. Why? Well, because it's not really coming out of my spending money at that point, right? It's money that's already been set aside for the charity. So this is just changing the timing on when it's going to be distributed to the charity. That's not very uncomfortable at all. And yet I also get to be reminded of how impactful I am because I can see the impact of my gift at that charitable organization. So notice how we're now breaking that feeling of being charitable, of being philanthropic, into a stretch, a string of experiences at the beginning, in the middle, at the end of the process. That makes it more enjoyable. I mean, we can compare it to look, it's the same experience that the ultra wealthy have had access to since well before the 1950s, called a private family foundation. Donor advised funds are just the democratization of the private family foundation. Now, think about it this way, Ted. If Bill Gates 25 years ago had just written a big check to charity, how many times would you have been reminded of his philanthropy since in the intervening time? Well, probably would have been long forgotten. But because he gave in a very similar way through a private family foundation, he's constantly reminded of how philanthropic he is. We're constantly reminded of how philanthropic he is. So it is a more enjoyable experience for the donor. And when you make that experience more enjoyable, well, that's going to lead to donors doing more of it, donors making more gifts. The other thing that makes it more enjoyable for the donor is this. If my tendency is to say, okay, my budget is to give, say, I don't know, $100 a month. And so I'm just going to be kind of knee jerk responding to whatever the various requests are that come along. But if instead of doing that, I say, no, I'm going to put that $100 a month into my donor advised fund. Well, now after some time, I've accumulated enough. I could do something really substantial with that. I could make an impact that's beyond just that, knee jerk pat on the head gift. And I could actually make a real difference with that gift. Well, it's the same idea whether we're talking $100 a month, $1,000 a month, or $10,000 a month. As we actually start doing that in a fashion that accumulates that charitable pot, so to speak, we can begin thinking about our philanthropy of a different order, of a different magnitude, that now I can really be making that massive sort of impact. And that's something I never would have thought of before if I'm only just making these small $100 or $500 gifts on a monthly basis. So that can make it more fun as well.
That research, of course, is absolutely fascinating. Let's make that very practical for financial and philanthropic advisors. How would they use this research to help their clients be more successful?
Yeah, so I think just the idea of familiarizing clients with using this as a tool. Now, in financial planning, most clients become familiar with this tool simply as a matter of end of year tax planning, right? Oh, let's go ahead and stuff this money in before the end of the year because the tax benefits are bigger. And I've got to say, we're in 2025, and that massively applies to 2025 because tax deductions are going to be worth much less starting in 2026. So we actually want to pull those into 2025 before we start getting the haircut on those that the new tax law has in 2026. So the idea is that maybe we get familiar with it just as kind of a, well, let's do a little bit of bunching, let's shift it, it's tax smart, and we do it that way. But as we begin to use the tool, we can start to see how, oh, actually, if I just regularly set aside philanthropic funds, this can really build up. And I can start thinking about making a more personally meaningful impact that's beyond just those small pat on the head gifts. And so I think that's the kind of experience that if we can have conversations with donors about doing these things regularly, perhaps initially for tax planning, but then just as a general idea of how we want to build this up so that not just tax planning, but we can make a bigger impact doing kind of bunching our giving in this way.
Wow. We're going to take a very quick break. And when we come back, we're going to have a lot more from Dr. James. And we're going to get his thoughts on some other comments that he's made in the DAF Revolution, making a difference in our modern world. We'll be right back.
If you're enjoying this conversation and want to learn more, the DAF Revolution is your practical guide to turning donor-advised funds into real impact. Packed with insights from over 120 experts, including today's guest, it covers philanthropy, finance, law, nonprofits, and technology. Get the DAF Revolution now on Amazon or wherever you buy your favorite books.
And we're back. Dr. James, in the DAF Revolution, I'm pleased to share a quote that we have in the book that you gave during our sit down together. And you said, the real inflection point in the growth of DAFs came when national financial institutions got involved. They created an army of financial advisors who could benefit from having DAF conversations, making DAFs a mainstream option for donors. Can you help our listeners understand the true significance of that inflection point?
Yeah, so that really changed things because, the general idea is we think, charitable contributions, that comes from fundraising. Fundraising is something that is done by nonprofit organizations. And so it's done by fundraisers, which is quite true. But what happened was when financial institutions started offering donor advised funds, the financial advisors could continue to manage those assets. Not only continue to manage them, in some cases, they might be taking assets under management fees, which is typical for management, but now they could manage them in a tax-free environment. Because in the meantime, before that money is distributed out to the charity, that's a tax-free growth environment. Well, that money grows much faster because it's a tax-free growth environment. And that means if you're being compensated based upon assets under management, your assets under management also grow much faster. Now, that sort of back office technical wonky reality then led to an entirely new set of people having charitable conversations. Because if I'm a financial advisor and let's say I'm being compensated based on assets under management, in the normal context, I don't want to talk about charitable giving. That just means I'm going to have fewer assets to manage because you're going to donate them somewhere. But now I've got a reason why it makes sense for me to talk about charitable planning, because in the interim, I can, number one, continue to manage those assets, but also it's going to create a big charitable tax deduction. That means, my client's going to be writing a smaller check to the IRS, which again is more assets for me to manage in their portfolio. And so it creates this kind of double benefit process that makes sense for me as an advisor to have these conversations. Well, now when you look at the number of financial advisors in the country, as compared to the number of fundraisers, well, you're more than doubling the number of people who are having charitable conversations, bringing up the charitable ideas. And that can be really powerful just to get people thinking about it. It's not that people aren't philanthropic. It's that, oftentimes it just doesn't come to the top of the mind when they're thinking about their wealth and their goals for their wealth. Well, now there's a reason for that question to come up. And just introducing that topic can be really powerful in affecting people's behavior.
Thinking of the advisors in that relationship, obviously this was a game changer, as you pointed out in your quote. But where does the trust factor of those relationships help?
I think the advisors are in the ideal situation related to trust and charitable planning. The problem is that if I'm hearing ideas from a fundraiser, well, I kind of question it, right? You're a salesperson, you're just trying to get money for your organization. And often there's fundraisers that approach their job that way. Well, that's a pretty low trust approach to those conversations. Hey, I'm here to sell you on my product, buy more of my product. In this case, my product is my charity that I work for, right? Whereas a financial advisor doesn't have that same sort of self interest. They can instead have broader conversations about what kind of an impact would you like to have more broadly. The idea being that we could talk about any range of charitable organizations or charitable institutions that help you to accomplish your particular goals. So I think it's actually much more natural for donors to have that more trusting relationship with a financial advisor who's essentially not selling them any particular charity than with a fundraiser. Now, I say that as a general rule. There are some fundraisers that are really good at becoming that charitable advisor and talking about all of the donors' charitable interests and helping them to accomplish a variety of their charitable goals, not just give more to my organization. And those kinds of fundraisers actually are dramatically more effective in the major giving space. But the financial advisors start out with a bit of an advantage in being able to have broader conversations about the donors' overall wealth and their overall philanthropic goals.
Dr. James, before you go, I want to ask you to help us understand another concept that's emphasized in your research, and that's the reciprocal alliances, that giving isn't always just selfless, but often ways to be part of something larger than ourselves. How does this idea help fundraisers better connect with modern day donors?
Yeah, so there's different kinds of charitable giving, and sometimes the problem comes that we mix and match these different kinds, and we use the wrong strategy for the wrong kind of charitable giving. So charitable giving is not always just what you might call, using the old English word, almsgiving, where it's giving down, right? Giving from high to low, putting some money in the bucket for the poor. It is when we look at the larger forms of giving, in particular, when we look at wealth sharing, it tends to be done as part of a shared community. And so this could be a shared community of donors, it could be a shared community of recipients. And so, as nonprofits are thinking about triggering these major life investment gifts, they can think about, how can I build donor community? How can I connect donors with other donors who are making these same kinds of gifts? Because, well, that goes right back to the beginning of our conversation about setting social norms. Oh, I see that other people like me make major gift investments like this. So when we create that kind of community, that's what leads to these larger gifts. It creates these social connections. It creates both this audience for my giving and this inspiration for my giving. And in fact, even allows me to inspire others with my giving because I've got this community connection. Now, not always, but sometimes the recipients themselves are also part of the community. Say, for example, if I'm giving back to my alma mater, I might consider some of the today's students. Well, they're kind of part of my community. We're all part of the family of this university and the future alums. Certainly, we see this in a religious giving, for example, a church giving context where I am part of the community. I am giving to the community. The community benefits. I'm also part of that benefiting community. So, this is the idea that if we can get beyond just a message of um, please give because here's this great need, which is an almsgiving approach, we can get to the kinds of motivations that lead to these larger, major life investment gifts, which begins with building that donor community and being focused on the donor experience. I like to put it this way. Instead of just saying, we just need to ask, and ask for more, start thinking in terms of, are we offering a donor experience that is worth the gift? Well, once you start thinking in those terms, it could change your mindset, especially if you're coming from that nonprofit organization mindset about how important the donor experience is, how important it is to, for example, build donor community that increases or enhances this donor experience. Because ultimately, that's what leads to these major life investment gifts. Frankly, it's not this message of, we're so wonderful, we're doing so many wonderful things, you should lay money at our feet because we're so wonderful. I mean, that'll get you the pat on the head gift. Isn't it nice for you? Isn't that nice for you people gift? But it's never going to give you the major life investment gift. You want that kind of a gift, you got to start thinking about creating a donor experience that's worth the donation.
Yeah, I try to help nonprofits understand that, raising money because you need the money, get in line, so does everybody else. That doesn't differentiate yourself. But as you're making the point, what kind of experience are you providing? Why would donors choose you over so many other causes that they could give to? And that's the answer that you come up with. Dr. James, as we have to unfortunately wrap up this podcast, I've enjoyed our time together, but you've made a priority to share your knowledge freely. And as a professor, you've made your charitable planning books and videos available to everyone. Before we leave today, can you make sure that my audience knows how they can get to all this great stuff?
Well, thank you for that, Ted. So encouragegenerosity.com. I share all my books for free. You want the PDFs, you want the audio books. Now, look, if you want to kill some trees, you can go on Amazon, order the paper copy. I'm fine with that as well. But I do share all my stuff for free, whether it be books or videos or audio books or even the law review articles and research articles that nobody wants to read. Hey, I link them there too, so you can jump on it that way if you have interest in that. And again, that's encouragegenerosity.com.
That's encouragegenerosity.com, everybody. Check that out. Dr. Russell James, thank you for joining me on this episode of the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF, and for your support of the DAF Revolution book. Your research continues to shape the way we understand our field of philanthropy. It's an honor to have your voice here today. And to my listeners, thank you for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your favorite podcasts, on LinkedIn and at tedhart.com. And don't forget to order your copy of the DAF Revolution, Making a Difference in Our Modern World, on Amazon or wherever you buy your favorite books. Until next time, I'm Ted Hart, and this is the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF.
You've been listening to the Nonprofit Coach and Everything DAF with Ted Hart. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you enjoy your favorite shows. And don't forget to pick up Ted's newest book, The DAF Revolution, available now on Amazon and at booksellers everywhere. Thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time on the Nonprofit Coach.